What I'd like to do now with this episode is to give you an outline of the deep state. By no means will this be a completely exhaustive outline and cover every single detail because it's much too big of a picture. What I'm going to do is give you some broad strokes about how they got started, who some of the players are, what some of the agendas and the tricks that they use along the way, and then finally showing how in our daily lives we're seeing it manifest now. And of course, at the end of all of this, I want to show you and explain to you how we can move past this, how we can succeed and win over this situation. It shouldn't be a daunting situation where we feel hopeless. We should be able to look at this and feel hopeful for the opportunity that is available to each and every one of us. So that being said, let's jump forward. This is episode number 1717. It is called The Deep State Crash Course and How We Win. Glad to be back. So this graphic here I wanted to show you, it goes all the way back to 30,000 years ago, where we see a mention of the Illuminati and Atlantis. I just wanted you to see that just as a point of reference to know how far back that goes. And then from there we move into present time, what we know of the Illuminati, which was in 1776. And that's the time when Adam Weishaupt came around and he began to bring his influence into the Masonic Society and into those who were the founders of our country in order to bring forth this agenda. And as he began to infiltrate with these ideas, the organizations and the ideas that once were the initial start of our country changed, because now you had those who wanted to see our country move forward in a good way, and you had those who were just still trying to oppress us. And those were the problems and challenges we had to deal with. So in 1776, this man named Adam Weishaupt came onto the scene. He was born in 1748. He was a German philosopher, professor of civil law and later canon law, and as we've been talking about, the founder of the Illuminati. Another important family that we'll get to understand through the course of this is the Rothschild family. The Rothschild families are known as bankers, the international banker family, and they've grown up throughout the centuries. Their fingers and their hands are in all sorts of activities of world affairs, political affairs these days. Their money has been spread throughout the world for a long, long time in order to buy influence and win them favor with different countries so they could continue to push their agendas. The United States of America is and has been for a long while run by the international bankers of the Federal Reserve. This is where the Rothschild family is embedded in the United States in one of the ways, and it's important to understand. We should be in America being taken care of by American bankers, American policies, but we have these international bankers. Why is that a problem? It's because if the international bankers want to do something, they don't necessarily do it with the best interest of America. They do it for the best interest of the international scene. And that's not really what we are necessarily trying to do, the international scene, because it's not necessarily to our advantage to do so. Okay, and here is a very important moment in time that we all need to know about, but it's often discussed in very small groups. But that's 1871, and that's when America was taken over in a very powerful way, because America at that point in time had the United States Constitution that we understood was the law of the land. But in 1871, the United States became a corporation. And once it became a corporation, now there was a second constitution, and that was the Constitution for the new corporation as opposed to the Constitution for the people. It says right here, two constitutions in the United States. First was suspended in favor of a Vatican corporation in 1871. Since 1871, the United States President and the United States Congress has been playing politics under a different set of rules and policies. The American people do not know that there are two constitutions in the United States. The first penned by the leaders of the newly independent states of the United States in 1776 on July 4th, 1776, when the people claimed their independence from Britain, and democracy was born. And for 95 years, the United States people were free and independent. That freedom ended in 1871 when the original Constitution for the United States of America was changed to the Constitution of the United States of America. The Congress realized that the country was in dire financial straits, so they made the financial deal with the devil, the international bankers, thereby incurring a debt to said bankers. Okay, and that's been our problem. The bankers, these international bankers, were loaning us money and were for our interests and our needs, but then we were having to pay them back that money plus great amounts of interest. Over all these years of all this interest, that's how we've gotten to be in debt, and that's why we are often thought to be a slave society, because we're just working off our indebtedness. We're working off the debt that we've accumulated, and we'll never get rid of this debt as long as we have the Federal Reserve, because they're a big, big piece of the puzzle, which brings us to the next discussion right here, the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve Act was signed by President Woodrow Wilson on December 1913, culminating 3 years of discussion and debate over the development of a central bank. With the nation confronting another financial crisis in 1907 in the United States, the only one of the world's major financial powers without a central bank, the nation was forced to turn to Wall Street. Finance mogul J.P. Morgan, who had bailed out the government out of a financial crisis in 1895, organized private sector investments and lines of credit to stabilize the banking system amid its latest panic. Recognizing that the nation could not continue to rely on wealthy individuals to stem an economic and financial crisis, Congress passed the Aldrich-Vreeland Act on May 30th, 1908. The legislation provided for the issuance of emergency currency and created the 18-member National Monetary Commission, chaired by Senator Nelson Aldrich, to determine what changes were necessary to the nation's monetary system and laws relating to banking and currency. Over the next 3 years, the commission traveled to the major capitals of Europe and hosted a number of hearings in the United States. In January 1911, Aldrich unveiled a plan that, after a year of revision by the commission, was presented to Congress in 1912 and called for a National Reserve Association. Although the bill did not come forward till 1912, it had been under development for years, going back to a November 1910 meeting. Investment banker Paul Warburg, Treasury official Abram Platt Andrew, and others on Jekyll Island, Georgia. Then the secret meeting was organized by financiers and bankers who reorganized the nation's need for a central bank and wanted to begin the process. Because they did not think the public would welcome a plan crafted in part by bankers, they made extraordinary efforts to keep the meeting secret, using only first names and telling others that they were on a duck hunting trip. Aldrich's proposal was attacked by committees in both chambers for giving too little control to the government, too much power to the bankers, especially those who ran the largest institutions. Among other features, the plan called for a 46-member board, with only 6 appointed by the government, and one of those, the head of the organization, selected from a list of 3 names supplied by the association. Unlike the first and second banks of the United States, the government would have no stake in the National Reserve Association. Okay, you can go on and on. There's a lot more to this. But the Federal Reserve Act was finally signed here on December 23rd, 1913. And that's really the point in which we can trace our slavery, because that's the point when the Federal Reserve, the international bankers, took charge of America, and now we were going to be indebted to everything that they were going to be giving to us from here on out. The IRS is part of the whole system that collects money on behalf of the Federal Reserve, and just like the Federal Reserve isn't a company that is part of our federal government, neither is the IRS. Okay, these are private organizations that are out there, but we as the American people have been led to believe that these are all part of our government institutions and that we should bow to everything that they say. But that's not the case, because they have been involved in the enslavement of America, not in the freedom of America. Okay, so it's very important that we understand as we look at these issues. It's very important that we understand how they have had such an influence over us for such a long period of time. Okay, so now that is a summary of what I like to call the takeover of America. Okay, we have the Illuminati influence that has been going on from a long, long, long time ago. We've got the international banker families that are in the mix. We have the United States was taken from being a free country into a corporation, now under a corporate constitution that most Americans have no idea is being imposed upon them. Then we had the international bankers take control in 1913 with the Federal Reserve Act. We also have this other link here for this video called The Creature from Jekyll Island. This is dealing with the Federal Reserve and how the Federal Reserve was created, kind of on the sly. We need to understand this because that is part of our enslavement, a big, big part.